and welcome to Meet the Authors. I'm your host, Philip Levin. So glad you could bring us into your home again today. We have an exciting show again. We have a few minutes of me as an introduction to talk about my little travels again and read some of the poetry. Then our two guests today. First is Marion Bowman. Marion is a world traveler, as she has been on a previous episode talking about her first book, and she'll be talking about that as well as her new book coming out, where she's talking about a dozen new places around the world which she's been. Our second guest today is Greg. I'm going to look at his name here, Greg Friedlander. And Greg Friedlander is an amazing guy. He's done so many things. He's a lawyer, he's a patent attorney, but his main interest and what his books are about are quantum physics. So sort of esoteric stuff that's a lot of fun. I'm trying to encourage him to read a little section from his book about Socrates. So we'll get started right now and talk a little bit about this little fellow here. This little fellow I picked up in India is a Hindu god, a very famous Hindu god. Now, when I was in India, every little home has their own little shrine, and they have all sorts of gods, but this is one of the most popular, the half elephant, half man. Don't remember what he's called, but they have little shrines to him, and it's not a polytheism, it's a multi-theism culture, and it's sort of interesting just to go to different cultures and find out how they can have these different beliefs. I always ask, well, if there's so many different gods, how come they don't fight all the time? And of course the answer is they do, but sometimes they don't, and bring peace and knowledge to the world. So you honor the gods that respect you and that protect your home. You can write so many stories about these type of things. And one of the things I like to do, and I encourage people, a lot of people come to me and I tell them what I do, and they see all the books I've written. They say, gosh, I'm working on a book. And I say to them, why don't, instead of starting a book, why don't you start with something shorter? Do a short story or even a poem. You can do a poem in just a few hours. And of course, you want to work on it and work on it and work on it and get some practice till it's refined. But it's a good starting place for you to get going with your writing. So I've been doing a lot of poetry lately. And in March of this year, there were two big poetry contests, the Mississippi State Poetry Society and then the National Federation of Poetry Society. They both had big contests, and I was honored to win 2 honorable mentions in the national contest, which, since they get thousands of entries, I was pretty proud of that. And then in the state contest, I won a first, a second, and 4 honorable mentions. So I'm going to read now from one of my entries that got the second place, just for the fun of it. This one is called Debut. And the topic, I'll always give you a topic. The topic was spring. Here we go. Under belligerent, knotty clouds, with brown oak leaves slapping their wet, flat exoskeletons, blanketing a hard dirt, exhausted from nourishing, once vibrant, emerald organics, topped with daffodils or lysine, now brown-tinged slackers. A silver blade, barely a hand-length long, stabs, cutting deep, disrupting earthworm-tunneled clods, creating a mole-hole, an ant's cavern in which a brown, flaky ball, placed snugly, sleeps beneath its nourishing blanket, unaware of rain, sleet, and snow, pummeling its roof, percolating down to tickle a root mass, tender tendrils, anticipating a future, waiting patiently, until a brave chloroplastic explorer pokes through to warming light, tentatively, unsure frost still threatens, gathering strength and length and faith, until, tipped with gold or chartreuse or azure, it joins its cousins in a cacophony of color, a month of glory before fading again into a year-long repose, gathering nourishments for next year's symphony. I love writing poetry. I love the images. And you can do this. Anybody who just sits down, uses their imagination and dreams a little bit. You can make it rhyming. You can make it not rhyming. Just get your emotions out. And as you develop your skills in putting your thoughts into words, graduate to short stories or essays or memoirs, and eventually get your book done. It's a lot of effort, but it's very rewarding. We have, as I say, 2 authors coming up in just a few minutes. Marion Bowman's Sailing into the Wind is a book we've already presented. She's going to talk a little bit more about that. And then she's going to talk about her new book coming up, and she'll tell us all about that. And our second guest is really a very interesting fellow. He's been talking our ear off with all his interesting concepts and ideas. Greg Friedlander has a couple of his books out here. I'm going to try to talk him into reading us some stuff. So hang on, and we'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned. for a taste of area history. Visit the Ocean Springs Museum of History. It's located at the Mary C. O'Keefe Cultural Center of Arts and Education on the second floor. That's at 1600 Government Street, Ocean Springs.
Here we are at the O'Keefe Museum of Art. World-famous architect Frank Gehry designed this campus. Right now we're in the museum store where you can see all sorts of wonderful things from local Mississippi artists. We're coming up with a great show called Vintage Motorcycles, The Wind in Your Hair. The O'Keefe Museum of Art has a really fantastic studio for ceramics. We also have a number of workshops. In the Gallery of African American Art, we have a very famous Chicago artist named Paul Wandless.
How you doing? It's the doctor.
And I am the doctor who writes. And I'm having a grand time today selling a lot of my books. And my best book is this one, The Tides of Mississippi. 6 first place awards across the region. And I'm really, really proud of it. It's doing very well.
Well, congratulations for such an honor.
Thanks so much.
Here at John Paul Barber Law Firm, we're here to listen to your problems and give you advice that we can give you from 30 years of experience practicing law here in Mississippi. We specialize in family law, wills and estates, estate planning, business formation, and business transactions.
Stop.
We also handle personal injury and immigration matters. Our number is 228-447-3522. We're here to help. Se habla español.
Welcome back. We're glad to have with us today on Meet the Authors, Marion Bowman. Hello, Marion.
Hi, Philip. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for coming. So
Yes.
glad to have you on our show again. So, Marion, you're here to talk about your previous book and your new book, and we're so glad to have you. So, Sailing the Wind, show us the book.
Sailing into the Wind.
And tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, I was on the show before, and I had just written a book, and it was just published. And so since then, I now have a website, which is marionbowman.com, and I also have a separate Facebook page, which is Books by Marion Bowman. And I encourage you to go to both to find out more about the book. But to refresh your memory, since the last show, I thought maybe I would read one of my reviews, and actually it's by Philp.
Ah.
Philp did the review for me.
I'm famous.
I know. And so look, you will recall a little bit about what the book is about, but I will read some more too. But this is what Philip said. It says, memoirs offer perspectives, or as Marion Bowman names them, doorways into different times. Miss Bowman description of her times in Saudi Arabia, the Ukraine, and across America brings to life times now changed. Written in a clear conversational style, Miss Bowman relates life changes common to Americans, especially women, including divorces, career moves, and family events. An enjoyable read, Sailing into the Wind creates images of a well-lived life.
It's so true. I loved your book. I loved reading about all the adventures you had and the places you've gone. You just bring everything so much to life. And particularly, I think we get so much literature and school and education from men's viewpoint. And to get your viewpoint, the women's viewpoint about divorce and about how you can be in charge of your own life, this book is really reassuring for that. And particularly with the second edition coming out and all the other places that you go.
And I also want to read a little bit in the beginning of the book. It's called My Sanctuary. It says, everyone needs a sanctuary place, a place to think and quiet. For me, it's the front porch, which has become a good friend. I wake up early in the morning, and the first thing I do is greet my porch. Even before opening all the blinds, the coffee begins to brew, and its aroma spreads quickly, diffused by the morning light that pours into the house. I often get a chance to watch the sun rise above the ocean's tide as it brings light to our world. Its early morning arrival brings a tone of hope to each day. Each day's beginning as I rock in my chair on my front porch. So often in this busy world, we forget to take the time to look at the sunrise, the sunset, the twinkling stars, or any many natural wonders that surrounds us each day. It's here on this porch, looking out to sea, that I feel at peace and spend quiet moments sitting in gratitude for God, for the life that God has given me throughout the years. How blessed I feel to be alive and to be in such a special place in my life. And I have to tell you, my daughter for Christmas was at my house, and so she had taken a picture of my front porch, and she had it enlarged, and she put that last part on the picture.
Oh.
And it's the front porch that I looked for myself. It was a very, very special gift. So I really, really appreciate that.
I love that idea of a sanctuary.
Yes.
Yeah, and in my case, we call it a man's cave. But yeah, it's good
That's
to have a
right.
place where you can be by yourself and really get your own interests going. So this really is a lovely book, goes all over the different places. And tell us, so you've been doing more traveling, and in your new book, you're going to be talking about some of the new places you've gone.
That's right. My new book, the working title of my new book is Traveling Off the Beaten Paths, because I've traveled all over the world, but I only want to talk about the places that are off the beaten path, basically. And my book kind of starts off a little bit like it says, traveling the path unknown has led me to many interesting places and people. I believe it is these adventures that have shaped my life. So I've chosen 10 places that have impacted my life, and among them are Vietnam, Belize, Bali, Cuba, Dubai, the Ukraine, Saudi Arabia, some interesting Club Med trips, and then actually I did a piece a few years ago. It isn't traveling to a place. It's called Sailing into the Fog, which is a sailing experience when we were caught into the fog, and how we managed to survive that and make it an adventure. So I'm going to include that also in my book. But my question, too, in my book, it says, can one find peace from traveling, or is it just another placebo that takes you out of your reality and puts you into a captivating world of other cultures?
That's a good question. I've done a lot of traveling myself.
Right.
And I can't say I do it much for peace. I do it for adventure. I do it for exposure to other cultures. People who never leave their home deal with the same people. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that people should never leave, should be considered improper never to leave your home. But I think when you get out and you see the world, it expands your own viewpoints. You realize that other people have lives just like ours and yet different as well. So tell me, I think the most interesting thing about that was the last one. I mean, the really interesting, Vietnam and Saudi Arabia and all those places are such different cultures. But being in a fog, I can just imagine feeling so lost and out of contact with any type of reality.
Well, it was about, maybe 8 years ago. I had a sailboat, a 32-foot Newport sailboat. And
You still have it?
No, I don't. I lost it in Katrina.
Oh.
I did lose it. But we decided to go for a Sunday sail, and it was kind of in the early spring or maybe winter it was. And we sailed around outside, out of the Pass Christian Yacht Club, and then it was getting kind of foggy out, so we decided we wanted to come in. And we didn't have really good electronics. I did have a GPS, and we managed to get close to the harbor. But then all of a sudden, we felt a thump, which meant that we had run aground.
Oh.
And so we decided, well, what should we do? So we tried to get out of that little predicament, but we couldn't. So we finally decided, well, we'll just drop anchor and wait for the tide to change and wait overnight. And of course, everybody's very anxious about the whole thing. Will we be able to get out of this, or will we have to be towed out? So it's how we spent the whole night waiting for the tide to change, and then so we could get out of that place and get into our harbor.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. You must have been in a lot of scary situations. People tell me that all the time when they travel. Oh, you're so brave. And I say, well, you know, you can get hurt right here in town. So you just go and do the things you want to do and don't be afraid of being hurt. Of course, I wouldn't go into a war zone, but except for that, it'd be good. So what's the title of this new book?
It's called Traveling Off the Beaten Path.
And when do you anticipate having it pressed?
I'm hoping to finish it by the end of summer.
Okay.
And have it published by the fall. That's kind of my goal anyway. So it's been interesting writing, though. I just came back from Belize, actually. I had a big birthday there. and I had a lot of relatives there. So that was a really very interesting experience to go back to the place where I was born. I only lived in Belize till I was 7 years old, but I still have a lot of relatives there. And so my cousin decided to give me this big 80th birthday.
Oh, how wonderful.
And I had like 30 of my relatives, cousins there.
A destination birthday party in Belize, huh?
That's right, I
Oh,
did,
great
I did,
fun.
I did. But then, of course, when I came back, I had to go to California to have it with my family. My
Have a
kids.
repeat birthday party.
So I had,
oh, how you suffer.
I actually had 3 birthday parties during the month of March. So I call it my March
birthday.
Yes, exactly right. And so when I went to California, my daughter invited all my friends too. So I had 20 people at that. So I really had a good celebration of our birthday. So
I guess so.
yes.
So 80 years old and been all around the world, and you're not sailing anymore, but you're
No.
still riding. And
Well, I do go sailing, but I don't have a boat.
oh, okay.
But I do have a friend that has a sailboat,
right.
and I still do sailing. I do sailing with him. As a matter of fact, I was doing racing last year still.
Wow.
So I still do sailing.
It's
So-
great to keep active all your life. Marion, we're so glad you could come and talk about your new book.
Thank you very much, Philip.
And one more thing. So where can they get this book?
Okay, it's on Amazon, and it's also at Barnes & Noble's. So
all right. Show them the cover again.
it's called Sailing into the Wind by Marion Bowman.
All right. Thanks so much. Next up, we have a physicist, attorney. There's all sorts of wonderful things. Greg Friedlander. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
This is Shaughnessy Printing.
We're a commercial printing company, been in business for 67 years, founded in 1950. Do all kinds of commercial printing,
Flyers, posters, wide format printing,
business cards, letterheads,
direct mail, stationery,
brochures,
newsletters, business cards, letterhead, envelopes, note cards, door hangers, rack cards, flyers. This is Shaughnessy Printing Company on 234 Kyvet Street.
we'd like to have your business.
I'm Dr. Brian Sack.
I has been with him about 8 years.
And Dr. Sack is a good person.
He's a good people person.
Well, we treat the patient with chronic pain.
All the medicine the doctor give me, everything is going good.
Well, here at Pain Stop, our patients are number one.
The pain that I was having, he have it under control and have it as to where I can function every day on a daily basis.
We use different diagnostic and therapeutic injections to help our patients.
Lo que yo le quiero decir especialmente a los puertorriqueños,
And I've had a good experience with the clinic. All the people are very educated and very helpful.
Epidural injections, sympathetic block, facet block injections, and various kind of nerve blocks.
And since I've been referred to him as pain management, he has really helped me.
It's a team effort.
We do our best to manage their pain according to their pathology, and I think we do a really good job. Dr. Sing's a very good doctor.
And I think he's a really good doctor.
que vengan aquí porque esto es un buen doctor.
He's a good doctor, and I'm happy to be associated.
Call 228-273-4096.
$30 can really make a difference, and we're asking you to do just that.
What will your $30 buy?
A tent for a homeless person who has no place to sleep. Or
breakfast for 15 people who live in poverty. Or
a monthly bus pass for someone without transportation, and much,
much more. Make a difference for a fellow Mississippian who needs our help. Give a $30 donation today.
Mental Health Association of South Mississippi, promoting mental wellness since 1963.
Welcome back to Meet the Authors. I'm really happy to have with us today Greg Friedlander. Greg Friedlander, author, has got some tremendous books. Welcome, Greg.
Good to be here.
So I want to tell you about Greg. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I just skimmed through these books. He's got 7 books out, and they're just amazing. Now, the reason that I'm particularly interested in I was actually a physics major. My father was a physicist, worked on the atom bomb, and I was a physicist until I sort of got lost in some of the concepts and decided I'd end up with electrical engineering. And now I'm back to my old haunts. Now the basis of this book, the whole theory is energy and space. The relationship is energy equals mass times the speed of light. And I just want you to try to explain to me and to our audience how this works. What is the concepts?
Well, most of physics looks at space as if it's some sort of mystery. And a long time ago, they used to talk about space as if it was filled with ether. And they did a test, which was a defective test for reasons that I'm going to explain, where they couldn't find the ether because they couldn't find the flow that was interrupting the flow of light through a beam. And so they said, well, there must not be any ether. And what my theory basically holds is that we have this formula that everybody accepts, that energy and mass are the same thing, which is an incredibly bizarre concept. Sitting here today to think that we solid beings are the same things as energy. But it gets even weirder because you can take that same concept back and you can say we're the same thing as energy. Energy is the same thing as photonic light, which is particle type light, and that's the same thing as space. And it turns out that space is the same as something else, but that's a little bit beyond what you can cover in a television show. But if you want to understand how this concept works, it's fairly simple because space exists in a dimension-free and a time-free environment. There's no time in space and there's no dimension. We perceive dimension because we're dimensional beings, and also because to some extent space is given dimension by mass, but space is dimensionless. And what
so I mean, I'm going to have to interrupt you here.
No, go ahead, that's fine.
When I think of space, I think of very specific dimensions. There's 3 dimensions. I mean, we learned in school, you're going to have point for 1 dimension, you have line for 2 dimension. I guess point is 0 dimensions, line's 1 dimension, a page is 2 dimensions. And I've read a lot of science fiction about 2-dimensional. And the 3rd dimension is space with like a box, and 4th dimension is time. So you have to have these dimensions to have space.
Well, let's talk about time first. We got to get rid of time because time is the great misleader of all physicists.
It's also my great misleader too, man. I never get things done on time.
Exactly. If you look at what we know about time, if you start to go very fast, like energy moves very fast, the speed of light, time disappears. And if you look at time in a high gravity field, like in a black hole, time disappears again. And the reason for that is because time is an effect. It's not an actual thing. And that's the big misconception, according to my theory. And everything I say is according to my theory. And the math is in the book, so if somebody says, well, that sounds bizarre, Greg, prove it to me, I say read the books. Or stop by my office, I'll explain it to you. Maybe.
Well, that's good.
but we know that time disappears during those time frames. And so what that tells me, and it's sort of mathematically proven, is that time is just an effect. If you go back and look at where we're at, and then you look at a black hole has 4 dimensions, and we live in 3 dimensions. And the reason we see a black hole shrink to a point is because it's stretching out in that 4th dimension that we can't see. There's a book called Flatlanders, if you ever want to, which was also written by a mathematician. If you ever want to understand how this dimensional viewpoint looks, you can read that book. But so we're sitting here in 3 dimensions. That's what matters to us. So if we look back from where we're at to energy, energy exists sort of in 2 dimensions. Photons exist in 1 dimension, and space exists with no dimensions. So why do we see dimensions in space?
That's really complicated.
Well, it sounds complicated, but it's actually just a stepwise process, just like E equals mc squared is a ratio. This is a ratio going backwards. We're just following that ratio back to where it begins.
So I know you're getting into your theory here, but I want to sort of sidetrack you a little bit and actually talk about your books. So you brought in some. I'm lifting them up here for the camera. There's 3 of the 7 here. And I must admit, this one is my favorite, The Science of Nostradamus. Put a little camera on me here. Science of Nostradamus. This is fun. This talks about Socrates and all the development of the theories. And And then these are much more like physics books, right? Here, you hold
That's
the
right.
book, your books.
Yeah, and let me tell you, there's physics is a process. I didn't sit down and come up with this entire theory. I have 8 books, all under the title Algorithm Universe Theory. And if somebody says, well, I want to read one, which one should I read? I would say 1, 2, 7, and 8. And then eventually I'll bring the other books up to the same level that those are. But if you said, well, I don't really want to know anything about physics, I just want to read something that's fun, that sort of talks about this same concept, then what you could do is you could say, well, read The Science of Nostradamus. What it does is it takes this theory and it says, is it possible to predict the future? And while not necessarily answering that question exactly, it does present it in a fictional context.
So you're going to read a little bit from this book for us, are you?
Right, right. And again, this is sort of a highly fictionalized historical fiction book that covers the development of this theory. So I'm just going to pick out first a paragraph that talks about the science behind it. The first thing I discovered was that history and dimension could not blindly be accepted for what the main body of physicists thought they were. One of the last things I began to determine was that there was a model that must exist. Since the direction of gravity is in a spiral, I must look for spiral models that might provide some clue as to what I am missing. And in fact, that's what actually occurred when I was developing it. And fun thing about this, this theory is 2,500 years old. A guy by the name of Parmenides, which somebody who's a lot smarter than me told me about this. They were reading my work and they said, that looks like Zeno's paradox. And Zeno wrote these paradoxes, and one of them was that if you shoot an arrow at somebody, it should never hit them because it should go halfway, and then it should go halfway, and it should go halfway, and it would never hit them. And that's actually a very interesting paradox. It's something that's worth thinking about.
I don't recommend trying it, though, in your backyard.
No, it's not something you want to try. But it's a solvable paradox, and that's one of the things that I work through, both in the fictional version of it and the other version, is how you would resolve a paradox like that.
So how did you get all your interest in physics? You're a lawyer and you're a patent attorney. How did you get so involved in this esoteric top field?
Well, you know, I was reading a book by Hawkins on
Stephen Hawkins.
Yeah. On the universe. And I was trying to reconcile that book with some quote from Einstein, a specific quote, which was the only reason for time is so that everything doesn't happen at once. And Hawkins' book was on hologram theory, which says that we're all living in a hologram. And there's a whole body of physics that talks about the fact that we live in a simulation, which is sort of like saying we live in a computer program. And to some extent, that's very similar to what my argument is, so it's not totally unique. What I do is I provide a model for that simulation.
Well, this has been really interesting, and we're looking forward to reading some more of your books. You've sent them to me by email, and Greg's books and all the books of our guests and my own books are available on my website. Put my website up there. And just a reminder to check us out here and on Facebook and on YouTube, where all the individual episodes are available. So, Greg, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks so much.
We're glad to have you, and we're looking forward to next time having more authors here on Meet the Authors. Be sure and tune in. Thanks for coming.